You know that feeling when you're scrolling through the news and you just get this pang, a sense of loss, like something fundamental is shifting and you can't quite put your finger on it? Well, you are definitely not alone. It turns out this collective sorrow has a name, and understanding it might just be the first step toward healing. What if we're not broken? What if we're just grieving together?
Just take a look at this. It's a real confession, a deeply personal hope, written in chalk on a public wall for absolutely anyone to see.
And it was just one of hundreds of other anonymous, incredibly honest, and unfiltered thoughts. Now, these weren't tweets or some kind of status update. They were actually written on a crumbling, abandoned house right in the middle of a New Orleans neighborhood, turning all these private hopes into a very, very public conversation.
This wall was the very beginning of the Before I Die project, a global phenomenon that all started with one person's private pain.
So the artist behind this, Candy Chang, was in a deep depression after suddenly losing a woman who was like a mother to her. And she kept staring at this abandoned house on her block, and she saw a chance to transform a space of neglect into a place for reflection on what really matters. And what happened next was, honestly, pretty astonishing. The very next day, the wall was completely filled up with responses. Strangers started talking to each other, sharing their own stories and their own hopes. It was so clear that people were just desperate for this kind of connection.
And from there, this simple idea it exploded. Over 5,000 of these walls have now been created in more than 75 countries. It turns out that this need to share our hopes and our fears in a public, judgment-free space, it's a universal human thing.
So what is this feeling that these walls are tapping into? It's something bigger than just personal loss. It's a kind of collective sorrow, and it actually has a name. It's called civic grief, and it's that really profound sense of loss we feel when the society around us seems to be fracturing. You know, a loss of trust, of safety, of a shared future. It's born from big political stuff, but man, it feels deeply personal.
Look, we all understand personal grief, right? The pain of losing a loved one. But civic grief is different. It's the loss of an ideal, maybe a sense of community, or even just faith in our institutions. The cause isn't one single event. It's this huge, systemic breakdown.
And this is why it can feel so isolating. Society gives us rituals for personal loss, funerals, memorials. But for civic grief, we're usually just told to get over it and that it's just politics. Our pain gets disenfranchised, and it leaves us to process it all alone. So why does this hurt so much? And why does it feel like almost everyone is going through it right now? Let's get into the root causes of this collective sorrow.
Okay, so we all operate within what's called an assumptive world. It's like this bedrock of beliefs we have about safety and justice and how society's supposed to work. Civic grief is the feeling we get when that bedrock starts to crack. And that grief can show up in a lot of different ways. For some of us, it can feel like anxiety, this sense of being vulnerable and uncertain when the social fabric we count on feels like it's coming apart.
For others, this sorrow sharpens into anger. I mean, when we feel betrayed or totally excluded by the very institutions that are supposed to protect us, that sorrow can turn into rage pretty quickly.
And sometimes it just shows up as denial. The world gets too complex, too painful, so we just retreat into old, simpler stories. Or maybe we just stop listening altogether.
And ultimately, it can settle into this deep, collective depression. A kind of quiet despair, where the sheer weight of it all makes it hard to even imagine a better future.
But here's the thing. This isn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. When we actually name this grief and start sharing it with each other, something really powerful starts to happen. Communities are finding ways to turn that pain into purpose.
Artists and communities are creating brand new rituals for our time. Projects like this one, Space for Grief in Toronto, use these stunning public art installations to create places where people can come together, acknowledge their sorrow, and find a little bit of hope.
And the actions can be wonderfully simple. This is another one of Candy Chang's projects. These I wish this was stickers. They turn vacant storefronts into these little democratic suggestion boxes, transforming symbols of decay into sparks of real possibility. Some are even using technology to bridge these huge divides. Just imagine a town hall where, instead of people just arguing, they work together to critique ideas that are generated by an AI. Using a neutral third party like that could be a really powerful tool for rebuilding dialogue and trust. Okay, so this all leads to a really powerful final idea. What if grief isn't something we just have to get over? What if it's actually a form of wisdom, a guide to a better future?
This is the core of a framework called Grief-Informed Futures, and it argues that by really understanding what we've lost and what we're afraid of losing, we can actually design more humane and resilient policies, communities, and systems. Grief becomes an essential design tool.
So as we look to the future, maybe the question isn't just what we must do, but what we must be willing to feel. To build that better world, perhaps we first need to learn how to grieve for the one we've lost, together.